Living here in Finland, I occasionally glance back at the news, and this last week I've seen they've been making a big deal out of Will Smith slapping somebody at the Oscars. But whilst they've been distracting you with celebrity nonsense, something really important's happened, and that is the decision by the Russian government to say to the EU, Britain, America, Canada, if you want Russian oil in the future, you'll have to pay for that oil in either rubles, gold or Bitcoin. Now this marks a major departure from how things used to be done. Since 1971, the world's been using the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world. And basically what that means is that most international transactions are done using US dollars as the currency. So for example, when Britain wanted to buy oil from Russia or Saudi Arabia, we didn't pay for it in pounds, we paid for it in US dollars. Similarly, if Germany wanted to buy Russian natural gas, they wouldn't pay for the natural gas in either euros or in Russian rubles. They would pay for the gas that they wanted in US dollars. So that's what people mean by the dollar being the world's reserve currency. It was the currency that was commonly accepted as a means of exchange. There's another name for it as well. They call it the petrodollar because most petrol, most oil, most diesel was bought using the US dollar as the currency to enact the transaction. So what that meant was that loads of countries all around the world had to purchase US dollars to buy Russian gas, Saudi oil, consumer electronics from Japan, all sorts of stuff. Now what that did, if you know your basic supply and demand, if the demand for something goes up, the price of it rises, and that's what happened with the US dollar. Because it was the world's reserve currency and everyone had to buy it, the dollar was strong, and that gave America a good position in that they could buy imports very cheaply. And the other good thing about it too was that by 1971 the US was off the gold standard, so that meant that the US central bank could print dollars at will and use those dollars to buy all the imported stuff that they wanted to, because the dollar was the world's reserve currency. And furthermore, they didn't even have to part with many of those dollars because the dollar was super strong, because everyone had to buy it to conduct their international transactions, because once again the dollar was the world's reserve currency. Now all of that's gone, and Putin's basically said, if you want Russian oil and gas, you have got to pay us in rubles. We aren't going to accept dollars, and we aren't going to accept euros, and we're certainly not going to accept pounds. We never accepted that rubbish, accepted it as a means of payment anyway. So from now on, no more dollars, no more euros, no more anything else apart from rubles, gold and Bitcoin. So you can imagine what's going to happen to the demand for the US dollar if it's no longer being demanded by the Russians in return for their oil. Well, obviously the demand for the US dollar is going to drop, and the demand for the ruble is going to rise. Now, something that you haven't been told by the BBC is that the ruble is already back to the level it was against the dollar before the stuff with the Ukraine started. And so what you can see, I think, in the long term is perhaps the beginning of the end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So why did Putin do this? How come he wanted rubles only and ditched the dollar? The simple answer is the sanctions. What's the point in asking to be paid in a currency that you can't spend anymore because you're not allowed to buy American products? So that's the simple answer, the sanctions. There's no point in asking to be paid for your precious oil and gas in US dollars when you can't spend them because you've been sanctioned and kicked out of the international financial system. But that's not the end of it, because the US and Britain have been freezing the assets of Russian nationals. So I think many people are now starting to doubt the dollar as an acceptable store of value. You know, if the US government is going to disrespect your private property rights, then the dollar, well, why would you want to hold it? Why would you want to hold any of your assets in countries like Britain? I read the other day, I think it was in a Daily Mail, that some Russian oligarch had his yacht seized from a UK harbour. So what's the point in investing anything in hostile countries? So it may well be, you know, well, this is a trend. You know, if you think back to the truckers in Canada, many of them had their bank accounts frozen. So I think what we're seeing is that the end of private property rights. So I think many international investors will start to look at other alternatives apart from the American assets, dollar denominated, or British assets denominated in sterling. And what this will lead to, again, is a decrease in the demand for those currencies. So why is this important? Well, basically, as if the dollar gets weaker, which it will do, if people stop demanding it, the value of the dollar will fall. That will increase the price of US imports. And America's like Britain, it's deindustrialized, so it's going to hurt a lot for American households if the price of all the stuff that they buy down at Walmart, which is 99% imported, goes up in price by 30, 40, 50% by whatever the dollar depreciates in value. I think the other thing too is other international investors who start to doubt the dollar, what they'll try to do is just to try and spend those dollars now whilst they still have some purchasing power. So a lot of dollars that were held abroad that were previously used to buy Russian gas and oil and all sorts of other stuff, maybe from China or Brazil, all of those dollars are going to start flooding home back to the UK looking to buy anything that's not bolted down. So this is where you can see, I expect to see some very, very serious levels of inflation in America. And American households are not going to get those wage increases to get anywhere near matching inflation caused by what's little more than a currency repudiation event. People are no longer accepting the dollar as a means of payment. That might sound exaggerated, but it's true, you know, basically, and that's what's happening now. We're seeing the sunset, the end of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. So it's quite amazing, really. So one last thing, on the one level, you know, you could explain Putin's actions sort of quite rationally, really. You know, again, I want to emphasise, I'm no Putin supporter. He's a former World Economic Forum young global leader. He meets with Henry Kissinger, a big part of the New World Order, you know, at least a couple of times a year. Describes Kissinger as being a close friend. This guy is in on it all. So yeah, a stronger ruble will help Russia, because for each barrel of oil that they export, they'll be able to buy more stuff. You know, a strong currency is beneficial for a country like Russia that imports manufactured goods. So that's the first thing. But however, having said that, if you think about Putin as a World Economic Forum agent, which I wouldn't rule out at all, and this conflict in Ukraine is all orchestrated, then and you think about their goal of wanting to have central bank digital currencies, then what's going on would also fit in with that narrative too, because to create a justification for a central bank digital currency in America, you'd need a hyperinflation to clear away the US dollar to generate a perceived need for a central bank digital currency replacement. And that's basically what's going to happen with the end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. People won't need to buy the dollar anymore. That's people all over the world. And what that's going to do is decrease the value of the dollar. A lot of dollars are going to flood back into America. There's going to be enormous cost push inflation caused by higher import prices for Americans. So it's going to create the inflation needed to justify, in a problem reaction solution scenario, a need for a new central bank digital currency. So I'm still not ruling out the possibility that Putin is just an agent of the World Economic Forum, and as Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage, and this is just another staged event. Something else that makes me think that way is that wouldn't the Americans have sort of used game theory to work out, like, if you sanction Russia and you stop them from buying your stuff, then wouldn't you expect them to stop selling their oil to you in dollars? Like, why would you expect them to keep on being asked to be paid in a currency, the US dollar, that they can't spend anymore? You know, you'd have to be pretty thick not to work that one out, that Putin would say, well, what's the point? I'm not having my oil being sold for dollars anymore if you were stopping me from spending them. So again, this kind of leads me in the direction that this is just orchestrated, that basically Putin and Biden and Boris Johnson, they're all batting for the same team, which is the World Economic Forum and the Global Reset. And they want inflation, and they're trying their level best to create it. You know, they've printed shed loads of money to finance all the insanity of furlough, bounce back loans, all of that stuff. They crushed aggregate supply with 2-year lockdowns, permanently destroyed capacity in the economy, because a lot of the businesses that went bust, they ain't coming back. And then you've got this final one of engineering higher oil prices and the death of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It points in that direction. So, that's it really. I'll turn the camera around again. And what a fantastic, although the sun's sort of gone down now, I don't know if you, I'm not sure if you can pick up the colours on this smartphone. But anyway, God bless.